Planned Parenthoods in Kansas City, Columbia, and St. Louis are now offering surgical abortions months after voters enshrined abortion rights in Missouri in the Constitution, but they still can't offer medication abortions. Now, the same day that the surgical abortions resumed, the state health department blocked medication abortions throughout Missouri. Planned Parenthood Central West End in St. Louis needed to submit a plan to the state in order to be able to perform these medication abortions. They say that plan was denied, limiting the types of abortions that they're able to provide now.
Here at Planned Parenthood, we comply with the law. We only practice within the law of the state of Missouri where we are. And so that means that we cannot provide medication abortion at this time in Missouri.
Missouri's Republican-led legislature, which passed the near-total ban, is trying again to limit abortions. A House committee next week is scheduled to advance a new constitutional amendment that would place additional restrictions on abortion. Now, any proposed amendment would need to be approved by the voters.